Thank you so much for joining us today for Optimistic Opportunities. I am beyond myself. And I am myself because my good friend Wicca Davidson, who I've known for 30 years, always challenges me to be myself and be my true self because that is the essence of me that is best. So I thank you always for that reminder, Wicca. Um, we are in season 2 and episode 5, and we have a sponsor who is actually my real estate company, Carl Johnson Real Estate, a Coldwell Banker HPW. We don't just market your property. We don't just list your property for sale. We market your property. We also have a concierge service for buyers, and we have trusted realtors throughout the nation that we partner with so that we can actually provide you with a referral anywhere in the United States. So that's enough from our sponsor. All the way back to Wicca. Wicca, thank you for joining us all the way from DC today.
My pleasure, Carl. I'll always do what you ask me to do.
As I was saying, Wicca, you are such an important person to me in my life, where you have always challenged me to be myself and be my true self and to present that. So I thank you again for that reminder today. We are diving into Wicca's story of struggles and strength. And that story today is about child abuse. So I'll just turn it right over to you to start with your story, Wicca.
All right. So yes, it's about abuse, and I was the child. I am not going to tell you a story about me abusing any other children. I'm going to tell you my story. I left home at the age of 15 because I was psychologically, emotionally, physically, and sexually abused by my father. My father had also been an abused child, and this is something that generally passes on from generation to generation. I ran away from home. I was in high school, and my next door neighbor and one of my high school teachers helped me run away from home. I think that actually the fact that a high school teacher helped me run away from home is pretty damn unusual.
Yes.
The principal of high school actually also, when I was brought back, let me graduate, even though I had missed a year and a half of high school. So I've been helped a lot by those people. The thing about my abuse is that I knew that I was terrified of my father, and I knew to try and make it so nothing bad would happen, but I really didn't remember all of the details. I just knew I was really afraid of him. I knew some of the physical stuff I knew. I remembered the time he emptied a bunch of drawers out of a dresser and threw them all on top of me and then told me to clean up the mess and went out of the door and slammed the door. I know that he hit me. I didn't remember all the details of it. So when I left home, I was a hippie and I wandered around and I did all kinds of stuff. And I got married. I got married to a man who was not all that interested in me sexually. I think, which is fairly common for people who have been abused as a child. But I didn't realize that at the time. One of the things that happened was I went back I grew up in Montreal. My family moved to North Carolina towards my end of my being in the 7th grade. And we moved to North Carolina because my mother thought if my father was not near his parents, that things would be better for him and for us, which didn't actually happen. But I did get to meet a lot of really great people in North Carolina, including Carl. I went back to Montreal for the first time as an adult with my husband because for some unknown reason, the American Psychiatric Association was having its annual convention in Canada, which I'd never really understood, but it gave me a chance to go back to Montreal for the first time without my family, without my parents. The Montreal Jewish community is fairly close. And so I had scheduled visits with all of the families that my parents were friends with. There were 5 families who all had kids who were my age or my little sister's age. And the first night we went to the Ship's house, Dawn and I, and we had a lovely dinner, and I got to see Martin and Heidi and Annabelle Ship, who were my friends. And then Harold and Nancy Ship, the parents, said to me, Wicca, can we talk to you? I said, sure. They said, can we talk to you in another room? I said, okay. So we went into another room, and they said that they wanted to apologize to me, that they had not stopped my father from abusing me. And I was stunned. I had no clue that that was going to happen. So I asked them what they had seen. And so they told me what they had seen. And then they said, we didn't know what to do. It was the 1950s. Your father comes from a wealthy Montreal family. And there's a myth that this doesn't happen in Jewish families. And there wasn't the awareness of abuse in the 50s that there is now, say. So we were there. We talked for a while. They told me what they had seen. They hugged me. We left. We went back to the hotel room. I lay on the bed in a stupor, trying to figure out what the heck had happened. The next night, we went to the Cohen's house, and exactly the same thing happened. I got to see Benita Cohen, who was my friend, and then Mita and Norman Cohen said, "Could we talk to you?" And I said, "Sure." And we went into another room, and they said, "We want to apologize to you." And I said, "Have you talked to the Ships about this? Have all of my parents' friends talked to each other about talking to me when I come up?" And they said, "No, we've never talked about this to anybody." So they proceeded to then tell me everything that they had seen. This happened at 5 families. Every person that I went to see who I had grown up with the kids and they were my parents' friends told me what they had seen and apologized to me.
That's amazing.
It was astonishing.
What a story. Yeah.
It was both incredibly helpful and amazingly sad.
Yeah.
But I wasn't mad at any of them. I understood. Abuse is not something that people like to talk about, and we don't talk about it a lot now. And there is some sort of a myth that, upper class or wealthy Jewish families that, they don't do this. But, they're like any other family. They do what they do. After that happened, there was a day where I was working as a nurse at that time. And I went into I was back, of course, at this point, we're back in Chapel Hill. I'm working as a nurse. I go into the public library, that little library that used to be on Franklin Street. And my mother and father are there. My father's in one part of the library and my mother's in the other part. This library is pretty small. So I talked to my mom and she said, "How are you?" And I said, "I had a horrible day. Somebody died. I had to call every single doctor to get new orders for all of the patients because I went over the time period that you're allowed to give meds. And all I really want to do is go home and take a bath." And my mother said to me, "When you were a little girl and your father had beaten you, the only thing that calmed you down was when I put you in a warm bathtub, warm water in a bathtub." And that was my sole conversation with my mother about being an abused child, was that. Carl, where do I go next?
And then did you have a conversation with your father also after you had learned about all of this in Montreal? You had an interaction with him, I think.
Not immediately afterwards, but yes. I had 2 times where we talked about it. The first time was before my daughter was around, and we were having our annual family Hanukkah gathering, which at this time I think was at my older sister's house. My older sister was adopted when she was a teenager, so she was not around in Montreal. She's a North Carolina girl. So we were at her house, and my father started being incredibly nasty and abusive verbally to my younger sister. And I stood up and said to him, you have to stop this. It's completely inappropriate. It's abusive. She doesn't deserve it, and she has not done anything. And if you ever act like this again in front of me, I will leave and you will never see me again. You can imagine how happy everybody was in the room. It was like a dead silent. Everybody in the room is just staying there. Their eyes are like gigantic.
This Hanukkah?
Like, what are we going to do now? Let's have a latke, right? So he stopped. Everybody came around and gave me hugs and pats and kisses. And my father sat in a chair and was very silent. And it's the first time I had spoken out in front of my family. I had spent most of my childhood saving my sister, my little sister, putting her out, keeping her out of harm's way as much as I possibly could. I wasn't completely able to do it, but the reason I stayed at home until I was 15 was because of her. I didn't want her hurt, and I didn't want her to be beaten or molested. So, flash forward after Hanukkah, a couple of years, 2 or 3 years, I have a daughter who was a very active child. And we were visiting my parents, and we were sitting in the living room, and she was sitting on the floor, and my parents had this big stack of New Yorker magazines on the table. And my daughter was very carefully picking up magazine by magazine and making a stack on the floor, and then picking them back up and making a stack on the table, and then taking them off again. And for some unknown reason, this really irritated my father. And he came over to my daughter, and he had his hand in with his knuckles. I don't know what you call this when you have this pointy knuckle, and he started hitting her on the head with his knuckle. And I picked her up and I said, "You don't ever touch her again. You may not ever touch her again. You may never hurt her again. And you may never be alone with her." And we left. So I had those two experiences. And then I had an experience at synagogue up here in DC. And do we have time for that story?
Yeah, so I hear that we've actually moved into the strength part of the story where you have become the protective parent, the protective sister. You've protected your daughter, protected your sister. And I hear that's the strength part of the story. So this last part of the story about the synagogue is another strength story that I think is also very interesting. So please carry on with that one.
All right. So there is a man who was a rabbi, not at my synagogue, but at a different synagogue, who got trapped in a network TV show sting, where people from this show would call up people and try and entice them to come to where they thought they were going to see a 14-year-old and be able to have sex with them. So the rabbi thought he was talking to a 14-year-old boy. And when he got to the house, there were TV cameras there, and he was exposed, and I don't mean physically exposed, but he was exposed to the world, or to the United States, as a pedophile. And he went to prison for 5 years. His wife left him. He lost his job. And he came out of prison, and he was looking for a place to pray. Jews pray, we pray in community. And our prayers mean more when we say them surrounded by other Jews. And so he came to our synagogue, which is a Reconstructionist synagogue, which is a sort of liberal progressive synagogue. It's not sort of, it exactly is a liberal progressive synagogue, who says that we will allow anyone to worship with us. And he went to the board of the synagogue and said, "I need a place to worship." And you say, "Anyone can worship here. Can I worship here?" And they worked out an arrangement that he could indeed come to services. He was met at the door by two people who knew him. He sat between them. If he had to go to the bathroom, they went with him. And then he was escorted out of the building he was never alone, and he was able to pray. And then it got leaked out into the community that he was there and that we were allowing him to pray at the synagogue. And this huge brouhaha came out where all of these people said, we have children here, we don't want him here. And all the other people were saying, well, he's not alone, he's not being, he can't hurt anybody here. And it became such a stink that he himself said, I don't want to cause your community to be in this much uproar, and I will leave and go find somewhere else to pray, which I hope he did. And then, because what Reconstructionist Jews do is when you get to certain Torah portions that has you talking about certain issues, we talk about how they were important in the past, and we talk about how they're important in the present. And so the conversation 1 week, a couple of weeks later, was about what is appropriate, whether he should have been there or not, whether we should have allowed him to pray there. And I stood up and said, something you don't know about me is that I was an abused child. I was abused by my father. And I gave them the gist of what I've said today. And I said, the one person that the children of your children, that the synagogue's children are safest from is this man. This man.
You've frozen for a moment here. We can't hear you, Wicca. Whoop. Okay, you're frozen. Your internet connection. I think your internet connection just came back. So
yeah,
you said
I don't know what happened.
Person.
Sorry.
There you go.
So the
person that you're most safest from is this person.
Right. And I said, what your children are not safe from are from those of us who are members of the synagogue who are abusing their children, because all families, this happens in every community and every type of religion. And it infuriates me that you're not letting the one person who has atoned for his sin and who is never alone and will never be near your children, and you're not addressing the larger issue of who is abusing their children in this synagogue. It's never talked about. Who does it? Who is it? And at that point, a lot of people in the synagogue started to, I don't mean at that minute, but over the next month or so, people left the synagogue. Some left because they agreed with me, and some left because they didn't like how it was handled, and some left because they didn't like that it was handled because he was allowed to be there. But one thing that did happen was that in the stalls of every bathroom, I'm assuming in the men's rooms, but I didn't actually go in the men's room, but in the women's room, in every stall, there was a sign that said, if you are being abused, if you are a victim of a domestic abuse, if you're being abused by a parent or a teacher, here's who to talk to. So I learned to speak out about it. I've never had a whole lot of trouble speaking out about anything, but you don't walk around usually in synagogue saying, hey, I was an abused kid, how about you? So
right.
I learned that it's important to speak out about these things, even if it's uncomfortable. I'm not uncomfortable with Carl, and I would do anything for him. And he had some good juicy topics that he could have chosen from about this, for strength and resilience. But this is
resiliency.
This is where we decided to go.
Right. So, well, I think that's exactly, your story just flowed so beautifully from the struggle to the strength, which I find so fascinating that, it's such a natural thing for the way that you just, told your story, you naturally ending up with the strengths of, where you are today from where you were as a child, and how you have become, this person that helps other people
So,
in these types of struggles. So, and
what-
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm interrupting you, but I realized there was one other thing that I've been doing, and I've done ever since then, is
Okay.
I make a buyer's or a seller's guides for
Oh, yeah.
I'm also a real estate agent. I've been a real estate agent for 25 years. The world's funkiest real estate agent. But I used to print buyer and seller guides to hand out to people because it was before emails. But the last page of every buyer's guide, whether I email it or print it, has a list of resources for where to get help if you're being abused by anybody. And I have it as the last page in every book that I send out.
That's awesome. That's your story of strength out of your story of struggle, is helping people. So thank you, Wicca, so much.
You're welcome
for telling that story. Really appreciate you being vulnerable with us today and sharing your resiliency out of this story.
Well, there are not many people I would do this with, but you are one.
Well, I really appreciate that. And I hope that this has been helpful for the people that are listening. In the information about this episode, there is a website that you can go to and get information if you are experiencing abuse or know somebody that's experiencing abuse, and they can help you with that.
Yeah. You can also contact me, and I will send you links to whatever you need.
Great. I'll go ahead and get some of those links from you as well.
Wicca at wiccadavidson.com.
And so that's the end of our episode today, and really appreciate everybody joining us. Sorry it was a little bit long today, but this is such a meaty topic to chew on for a little while. I don't think that's a problem at all. So
we scared the camera.
You scared everybody away.
We scared the camera.
Yeah. But then again, another quick little word from our sponsor, my real estate company, Carl Johnson Real Estate at Coldwell Banker HBW. You can find out more information about my company at carljohnsonrealestate.com, and that's carljohnsonrealestate.com. You can see more episodes of Optimistic Opportunities on that website, and go to Wicca's page and see her bio. It's a fascinating bio. I highly recommend that you go read it. So that's all we have for today. Wicca, hang out with me for just a few minutes after this, because we can chat some more. But we'll just say goodbye to everybody. So please remember to help one another is what I always like to end up with saying. So y'all take care. Bye-bye.